In some of these paintings, they have like a double-edged sword. People have said that about my work for a long time. Like on the one hand, it seems really sweet, but on the other hand, there's this undercurrent of unrest. I am Amy Vigilante Longini, Amy Vigilante for the art. I've been an artist my whole life and always painted and have had many arts administration jobs. And now I get to be a full-time painter. I am always exploring landscape. Like many, many artists, going back to landscape is always the way to get recentered. And so what I'm currently doing, they are like landscapes. I've done over the years many interiors, and this body of work is kind of both, inside, outside. But it was really the pandemic that was a huge inspiration, the lockdown of the pandemic. And there's, I think, a lot of emotion or fear in some of these paintings. They have like a double-edged sword. People have said that about my work for a long time. Like on the one hand, it seems really sweet, but on the other hand, there's this undercurrent of unrest. So I think that's true in a lot of these works. Like I was saying, I always painted. Then I went in this period of making quilts. It was something I always wanted to do, textile arts. I call them quilts, even though it's considered women's work, and some people think there's something shallow about that, but I think it's great. And I love the connection to the traditional utilitarian object aspect of textile art. But I collected fabrics for years and years, and then it was during the hurricanes, actually, of 2004 that all of a sudden I stopped painting and started making quilts. It had something to do with comfort and sewing. And so from 2004 until 2020, I was only making quilts, except lots of gouache. And when I travel, I do, keep my diaries and my watercolor and my gouache. When the pandemic came, we were locked down, and we had just built our house, and I moved in on Valentine's Day while my husband was in Geneva, Switzerland, with the World Health Organization dealing with COVID. And so suddenly we're here, and there's this like lockdown. And the first thing I did was call what used to be Utrecht and is now Dick Blick, the art supplier in New York, and said, "Oh, you know what? I've been making quilts all these years, but now I'm going to paint again." And the one on the phone said, "Yeah, you and every other artist in America has decided to paint their way through this lockdown." I was amazing to hear that, So, yeah, it was scary. And if I had the paintings in front of me, and when you see them, they don't look it, but there was so much fear. So the earliest painting in this show is called First Cow's Peace. Well, the view out of our backyard is cows. They are not always out there, but it's the beef cattle teaching unit of the University of Florida. We back right up against it. So here we were locked down. No cats and dogs. My son couldn't even come in the house, even though he lived in Gainesville. But we had these cows, so they were like our pets. And I found that to be this huge source of peace. And it's kind of what just propelled me into the whole thing of just the landscape and the sort of comfort of that. Handwriting is your style, and my quilts, somebody referred to them as big stitch. And if you look at my paintings, there's a lot of black lines, and it's similar to big stitch. I definitely have a need for boundaries and black lines and separations. So that's, maybe kind of throughout all of the work. But they're very similar. The textiles are, little pieces put together and then drawing over it. The stitching is a lot like just drawing. And so there's huge relationship. When I was younger, I knew I wanted to work with fabrics, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. So I had painting stretchers, and I would stretch printed fabrics over them and then do paintings on top of those fabrics. And I had a lot of those. And then I started doing things like, we didn't used to have gesso in the old days. It was rabbit's hide glue, which was really nasty. So I rabbit's hide glued fabrics and then painted over them. But it became where trying to mix them was stupid. It just was not what I was trying to accomplish. I figured out they need to be separated. And so there are a lot of weird overlaps where I've taken canvases and attached them together, making a quilt. But in general, I'm back to painting and more sort of from the heart. You know, I really recycle, and like all the quilts, for example, I didn't go buy those fabrics for the most part. They came to me all in really interesting ways, and they all have like meaning. And I will use, you know, I like threads hanging off, and I like the look of it being made there, the printing of the manufacturer. The quilts in this show are going to be Marimekko, and the word Marimekko appears everywhere because I don't cut it out or hide it or whatever. You know, quilts are for warmth, and there was a big show from Gee's Bend, Alabama, by quilt makers that were sort of discovered maybe 30 years ago, and they were doing the quilts for utilitarian reasons. They're just older, mostly African-American women, and they were making quilts out of clothing, you know, old pants and this and that, and it was for the purpose of warmth. And I really like that, as opposed to just something to make to be beautiful and hang on the wall, but also that it has a purpose. So yeah, climate change is killing all of us. I'm just really very aware of, you know, what's going on and the changes, and the diaries that I keep that there are not going to be a lot in the show, but they're all about the weather. They're always like, today was rainy, and yesterday was sunny, and now there are a lot of deer, and now there are no fish, and now, you know, how is this happening, and why is that affecting that? So it's in an unconscious way and very like removed from the intellectual, but very emotional feeling. To me, painting and curating a show are very similar. Making art and curating other people's art, there's a big crossover. And in a way, it's a relief because it's not so focused on you and your thoughts and your creativity. So it was a very natural progression. I taught art for a long time. I taught art education, and my doctorate's in art education. So I taught elementary art teachers how to teach. And I didn't like it. I thought I was going to love it. And my parents were professors, and I really thought teaching was what I wanted to do. But I didn't enjoy it as much as I got an arts administration job in Tallahassee, and I ran award programs throughout the state of Florida for the arts, the Florida Artists Hall of Fame, Arts Recognition Awards, and that was really fun. I really liked doing that, and I was surprised because I didn't know that I had that interest. But then a museum job came up. It was in Melbourne. The Brevard Art Center Museum was my first curating job. And I just had no idea, but I went, and I loved it. I immediately fell in love with that work. I like handling the art objects. I like figuring out what goes with what and why. I like finding them, and I like talking to the artists and collectors. And I did that from the 90s till 2020. So like 30 years I was being a curator, and I really enjoyed it. I think for me, the main thing about curating a show is it's brand new every time. What I didn't like about teaching was the repetitiveness of it. It's like every semester would start, and you were saying the same thing you said in, you know, week 2 of the last semester and the next one. So putting a show together is always like original, and I think that's, you know, what I really loved. Yeah, I mean, I know everybody loves traveling, and I feel really lucky I'm getting to do it now. So my husband does a lot of travel, and I started by going where he was working, which tended to be Geneva, Switzerland for the World Health Organization. And then because I'm half Italian and I really wanted to get to know Italy, so we started, I don't know, traveling more in Italy. I did. He's always working. I travel alone a lot of the time, but I don't know. Then I got my dual citizenship because I wanted to be a part of it. And now, for me, Italy and Europe, they present a different light quality. There's a totally different culture. The way people interact with art is completely different. And even more, I'm in love with the buildings and the architecture and the landscape. And it's so inspirational. It's just, it makes me want to just work that way. And what I'm doing is going to places and just painting what I see. It's often from a hotel room or a park or just being outside. And a lot of the paintings are composites. They may not be a direct view of something. Like in this show, the one that's called Windows to the World. It looks like it's the main castle in Trento, but it's really composite of a whole bunch of different buildings and areas and foliage and gardens, and the mountains aren't even realistic. It's like these mountains are here and these mountains are here, but in reality they're not really like that close together. So it's just like having responses to the way it looks. Well, I totally relate to him, and like a lot of people, like Matisse and Van Gogh and all the people that moved to the south of France and responded to that landscape. And he was, more of the Blue Rider group, and I love that group. His colors, like mine, are just more pure and brilliant and in your face. And that's something I always really liked. His style it's just a style I grew up with. It's a period I always really, watched. I grew up in New York, and I spent most of my childhood in museums. And I remember him well, and I remember that, that whole period, and it definitely affected me a lot. So getting to partner with him is an amazing opportunity and privilege, and he was really amazing. And all of the work that is in the collection of Stetson University is just mind-blowing, that's all there together, intact like that, and in perfect condition and beautiful. So just getting to see that is inspirational. I like to go a little bit more back to abstract, and I do a lot of objects and interiors. So these very large canvases, which are big for me, 4 foot by 5 foot, probably go back to smaller because I'm traveling more and I like the portability. And I'm going to keep going. My paintings are oil on canvas, but they're actually water-based oils. And it's easier to, travel with, less toxic and so forth. So I'm probably going to be doing canvases. I love just off a square. They're probably going to be about 12 by 14. And they're going to be more interiors and still lifes, but through the window, the peak of the landscape. And that's so, copying the south of France people. But I was just recently there, and that is the kind of impact that, drives you.